Captain Lee Hana was floating in the empty space between stars when everything changed. Her cargo ship New Dawn was old and beaten up, just like most human ships these days. The hull had patches welded over patches, and the engine made weird noises that would scare anyone who didn't know ships like Hana did. She'd been hauling medical supplies and food rations from one colony to another for 3 years now, ever since the military kicked her out for asking too many questions. The distress signal came through weak and broken at first. Hana almost ignored it, thinking it was just another commercial broadcast, or maybe pirates trying to lure ships into a trap. But something about the voice made her stop and listen. It wasn't human, that much was clear. The words came out strange, like whoever was speaking had to think hard about each one. "Please," the voice said. "Anyone who can hear this, we need help. The swarm is coming and we cannot stop them." Hana leaned forward in her captain's chair and turned up the volume. The signal was coming from Kepler 442c, a farming world way out on the edge of known space. She'd heard of the Verdani who lived there. Plant people, some called them, though that wasn't really fair. They looked more like walking trees with gentle faces and leaves for hair. They grew the best food in 3 sectors and never bothered anyone. "We sent messages to the council," the Verdani voice continued. "We sent messages to everyone, but no one answers. The void swarm has already taken our outer colonies. They eat everything, our people, our crops, our cities. Nothing is left but empty rock." Hana had heard stories about the void swarm. Creatures made of living crystal that moved from world to world, consuming everything they touched. Most people thought they were just scary stories, spaces told to frighten rookies. But the fear in the Verdani's voice was real. The transmission kept playing on repeat for hours. Hana tried to focus on her navigation charts, tried to plot a course to her next delivery. She had bills to pay and a crew to feed. Getting involved in someone else's fight was a good way to end up dead or broke, probably both. But she couldn't stop thinking about that voice, about the way it said anyone like they were running out of hope. Finally, she pulled up the galactic news feeds to see what the big civilizations were saying about it. The Galactic Council had issued a statement that morning. She read it twice, to make sure she understood it right. The situation on Kepler 442c falls outside Council jurisdiction as a border world incident. Member civilizations are advised that intervention would violate established protocols regarding non-aligned territories. Hana stared at the screen. They were calling it a situation, like it was a paperwork problem instead of people dying. She checked the other major powers next. The Altarian Empire, those proud bird people with their golden ships and fancy technology, had released their own statement. Current resource allocation prevents intervention in remote sector conflicts. The Cetian Federation was even worse. They just said no comment and referred everyone to their non-interference policy. One by one, every major civilization in the galaxy had found an excuse to look the other way. The Verdani were alone. Hana sat back in her chair and stared out at the stars. Her ship's computer beeped, reminding her that she needed to make a decision soon. Jump to the next trade route and make her delivery, or do something incredibly stupid. She thought about her own people, scattered across dozens of colonies and ships like hers. Humans didn't have a big empire or fancy technology. They didn't have a seat on the Galactic Council or trade agreements with the major powers. Most of the galaxy saw them as newcomers, barely worth noticing. Just another small species trying to make a living in the big empty. But humans had something the big civilizations seemed to have forgotten. They remembered what it felt like to be small and scared and calling for help. Hana reached for her communications console and opened a wideband transmission. She set it to broadcast to every ship, station and colony within 50 light-years. Most of them would be outcasts like her. Smugglers, exiles, people who'd been kicked out or left behind by the respectable civilizations. "This is Captain Lee Hana aboard the New Dawn," she said into the microphone. "I'm broadcasting to anyone who's listening, anyone who knows what it's like to be forgotten." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The galaxy has abandoned the Verdani people. Every major power has turned away while an entire world dies. But we don't have to. We're not much, but we're something. And sometimes Something is enough. She ended the transmission and waited. Either ships would come or they wouldn't. Either way, she was going to Kepler 442c because someone had to. The first ship to answer Hana's call was a beat-up fighter that looked like it had been through 3 wars and lost all of them. The pilot's voice crackled over the comm, rough and tired. "This is Kim Day in the wildcard. Got your message, Captain. Guess I don't have anywhere better to be." Hana smiled despite herself. She'd heard that name before. Kim Day used to be a decorated pilot in the Terran Defense Force until he refused to bomb a civilian colony during some corporate dispute. The court-martial had been all over the news feeds. They'd stripped him of his rank and kicked him out, with nothing but the clothes on his back. "Good to have you, Wildcard. How's your ship holding up?" "She's ugly, but she flies. Fair warning, though, I might have borrowed her from some very unhappy people." More ships kept arriving throughout the day. Each one brought its own story of rejection and exile. Park Min-ho showed up in a converted cargo hauler with the strangest crew Hana had ever seen. They were androids, but not the simple worker models most people were used to. These ones moved and talked like real people with their own thoughts and feelings. "We were created to serve," Min-ho explained when he came aboard the New Dawn for the planning meeting. "But when we started asking questions about our purpose, our makers decided we were defective. They wanted to wipe our memories and start over." "So, you ran?" "We liberated ourselves," Min-ho corrected with a small smile. "Along with our ship. We've been hiding in the Outer Rim ever since, helping other artificial beings escape their creators." The most surprising arrival was Choi Rena and her warrior clan. They came in 5 small ships that looked like they were built for speed and fighting. Rena herself was impressive, tall and strong, with scars that told stories of battles won and lost. Her people had been exiled from their homeworld for challenging their government's decision to surrender to a more powerful enemy. "We lost our honor when we were forced to leave our home," she explained to Hana. "But honor can be reclaimed through righteous action. The Vadani's cause is just, and they have no one else to stand with them." By the end of the second day, 37 ships had gathered at Hana's coordinates. It was the strangest fleet anyone had ever seen. Cargo haulers like the New Dawn mixed with stolen fighters, mining ships, and even an old passenger liner that had been converted into a makeshift hospital ship. The crews were just as mixed. Humans, aliens, androids, and even a few beings that nobody could quite identify. Yun Ji-won, the youngest member of Hana's crew, stared out at the assembled ships with wide eyes. He'd joined the New Dawn 6 months ago, fresh out of trade school, and full of dreams about seeing the galaxy. This wasn't what he'd signed up for. "Captain," he said quietly, "why are we doing this? I mean, really. None of us know these Vadani people. We don't owe them anything. Most of us are barely scraping by as it is." Hana looked at the young man, remembering when she'd been that age, and thought the universe made sense. "Ji-won, do you know why I got kicked out of the military? Something about refusing orders? I was told to evacuate a mining station that was under attack. Standard procedure was to save the human workers first, then worry about the alien laborers if there was time." Hana's voice got harder. "I refused. I said we save everyone, or we save no one. My commanding officer called it insubordination." She gestured toward the collection of ships outside. "Every person out there has a story like that. They all stood up for something when it would have been easier to look away. The galaxy doesn't want us because we ask inconvenient questions and make uncomfortable choices. But that doesn't answer my question. Why are we risking our lives for strangers?" Hana was quiet for a moment, watching Kim Dae's fighter practice attack runs with Rena's warriors. The coordination was rough, but they were learning to work together. "Because someone has to," she finally said. "The big civilizations with their fancy ships and powerful weapons, they're too worried about politics and profit margins to care about what's right. But we don't have anything to lose except our lives. And what's the point of living if you can't live with yourself?" She put her hand on Ji-won's shoulder. "And because when the galaxy turns its back, humans step forward. It's what we do. It's who we are." The planning sessions went on for hours. They had 37 ships against reports of hundreds of void swarm vessels. The math was simple and brutal. They were going to lose, probably badly. But as Hana listened to the voices of captains and crew members volunteering for the most dangerous assignments, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not hope that they would win, but hope that they would make a difference. Park Min-ho's androids volunteered to handle the technical aspects of the battle, their computer brains able to process information faster than organic minds. Rena's warriors would lead the fighting, their combat experience invaluable. The cargo, haulers and mining ships would focus on evacuation and rescue. "We're not trying to win a war," Hana told the assembled captains. "We're trying to buy time. Every minute we can hold them off is another minute the Verdani have to escape." When the final preparations were complete, the 37 ships of the makeshift fleet jumped to hyperspace together. They were heading toward certain death, and they all knew it. They went anyway. The moment they dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler 442c, Hana knew they were too late to save everything. Where the northern continent should have been green with Verdani forests and farms, there was nothing but grey wasteland. The Void Swarm had been busy. Their crystalline ships hung in orbit like deadly jewels, methodically strip-mining everything below. "Dear God," whispered Yun Ji-won from his position at the sensors. "The entire northern hemisphere is just gone." Hana gritted her teeth and opened the fleet channel. "All ships, this is New Dawn. We knew we'd be walking into hell. The question now is how much we can save from it." The swarm noticed them immediately. Dozens of bioships broke off from their feeding and turned toward the small human fleet. Up close, the alien vessels were even more terrifying than the reports had suggested. They looked like living creatures made of crystal and metal, constantly shifting and adapting as they moved. Kim Day was the first to engage, his stolen fighter diving toward a cluster of smaller swarm ships. His plasma cannons lit up the darkness, but the energy beams just bounced off the crystalline hulls like raindrops. "Weapons are useless," he reported over the comm. "These things are adapting to everything I throw at them." Oh Seung-min, Hana's chief engineer, had been watching the battle from his cramped workshop deep in the New Dawn's belly. He was a small, quiet man who preferred machines to people, but his mind worked in ways that constantly surprised Hana. "Captain," his voice came through the intercom, "conventional tactics are useless here. These bioships learn from every attack. We need to stop thinking like soldiers and start thinking like smugglers." "What do you mean?" "I mean we use what we have, not what we wish we had. Give me 20 minutes and I'll show you." While Seung-min worked his magic, the rest of the fleet was learning hard lessons about fighting the swarm. The bioships didn't just adapt to weapons. They adapted to tactics too. Every strategy the humans tried worked once, maybe twice, before the swarm figured out a counter. But the Outcasts had one advantage the swarm hadn't counted on. They were used to making do with nothing. Seung-min's solution was brilliantly simple. Instead of trying to punch through the adaptive hulls with energy weapons, he rigged the ship's mining charges as kinetic projectiles. The New Dawn had been hauling industrial explosives for a mining colony, and Seung-min turned every single charge into a guided missile. "The bioships can adapt to energy," he explained as his makeshift weapons streaked toward their targets. "But they can't adapt to old-fashioned physics. Mass times velocity equals a very bad day." The first mining charge slammed into a swarm ship and detonated inside its hull. The crystalline creature convulsed and went dark, drifting away from the battle. "It worked!" Ji-won shouted. "Seung-min, you beautiful genius, it actually worked!" Word spread quickly through the fleet. Within minutes, every ship was improvising weapons from whatever they had on board. The mining vessels had the most explosives, but even the passenger liner got creative, launching cargo containers full of metal debris at high velocity. Park Min-ho's androids proved invaluable in the chaos. While human minds struggled to process the three-dimensional battlefield, the androids calculated firing solutions in real time, predicting where the bioships would be and adjusting for their adaptive behavior. "Incoming cluster at bearing 27 Mark 4, Min-ho reported calmly, while his fingers danced over his weapons console. "Recommendation: concentrated fire on the lead vessel. It appears to be coordinating the others." Choi Rena and her warriors took the most direct approach of all. Their small, fast ships weren't built for extended firefights, but they were perfect for hit-and-run attacks. When conventional weapons failed, Rena made a decision that shocked everyone. Honor guard. This is Rena. Ramming speed, target the command clusters. Captain, that's suicide, Hannah protested over the comm. No, Rena replied, her voice steady and sure. Suicide is giving up. This is tactics. Rena's ship accelerated toward the largest bioship in the cluster, her warriors following behind. At the last moment, she triggered her ship's self-destruct, turning herself into a guided missile. The explosion tore through the swarm vessel's center, and suddenly the smaller ships around it seemed confused, directionless. The big ones are controlling the little ones, Xiongmin realized. Take out the commanders and the rest fall apart. The battle became a desperate game of cat and mouse. The human fleet would identify command ships, concentrate their improvised weapons and punch through before the swarm could adapt. Ship after ship fell on both sides, but slowly, impossibly, the humans were winning. For 3 days and nights, they held the line. Evacuation shuttles ran constantly between the planet's surface and the few safe zones they could establish. Verdani. Families crowded into cargo holds and passenger compartments, their leaf-like faces showing gratitude even in their terror. Hannah barely slept during those 3 days. She coordinated attacks, managed evacuations, and watched her friends die one by one. Kim Dae's fighter finally succumbed to accumulated damage on the second day, but not before he'd taken out 6 more bioships. 2 of Rena's warriors followed, their captain's example, ramming critical swarm positions when their weapons ran dry, but they were holding. Against all odds, 37 ships were standing against hundreds and somehow not losing. By the end of the 3rd day, they'd evacuated nearly 2 million Verdani. The southern continent was still under attack, but the rate of consumption had slowed dramatically. For the first time since the crisis began, it looked like they might actually save some of the planet. That's when Yoon Ji-won's sensors detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. "Captain," he said, his young voice cracking with fear, "you need to see this. Long-range sensors are picking up massive contacts coming out of hyperspace. It's the main swarm fleet." Hannah looked at the tactical display and felt her heart sink. Hundreds of contacts, each one representing a bioship larger than anything they'd faced so far. The advance force they'd been fighting was just the appetizer. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. 6 hours, maybe 7. Hannah looked around the bridge at her exhausted crew. They'd given everything they had and more, but this was beyond what anyone could ask of them. Still, she knew what the answer would be before she asked the question. "All ships, this is New Dawn. We've got incoming reinforcements for the swarm, big ones. Anyone who wants to leave now, no one will think less of you." The comm channel was quiet for a long moment. Then Kim Dae's replacement pilot, a young woman named Song Minji, spoke up. "Where exactly would we go, Captain? This is our fight now." One by one, the other ships checked in. They were staying. The main swarm fleet was coming, and they would meet it here. The main swarm fleet arrived like a nightmare made real. Hundreds of bioships dropped out of hyperspace, each one the size of a city. The creatures they'd been fighting for 3 days suddenly looked like children next to these monsters. The massive vessels hung in space like floating mountains of crystal and flesh, blocking out entire sections of stars. Hannah stood on the bridge of the New Dawn, watching her tactical display fill with red contacts. Her small fleet of 23 remaining ships looked pathetic against this armada. They'd lost 14 vessels in the fighting, good people who died buying time for strangers they'd never met. "Captain," Yoon Ji-won said quietly, "we should run. We did what we could. We saved 2 million people. That has to count for something." Before Hannah could answer, her communications officer looked up with confusion. "Captain, we're getting a priority." "Transmission, it's from the Galactic Council." Hannah frowned. The Council hadn't responded to a single Verdani plea for help, but now they wanted to talk. "Put it through." The voice that came over the comm was cold and official, the kind of bureaucratic tone that made Hannah's skin crawl. "Attention unauthorized. Combatants in the Kepler 442 system. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Your presence is escalating a contained situation and violating several interstellar treaties." Hannah stared at the speaker for a moment, then started laughing. She couldn't help it. After 3 days of watching friends die while the galaxy looked the other way, Someone was calling this a contained situation. Contained? She said into the microphone. 2.5 million people are dead and you call it contained? Captain, Hana, you and your associates are making this crisis worse. The swarm was content to limit their activities to one system. Your interference has drawn their attention and resources. Withdraw now or face prosecution for violation of the non-interference. Accords. Non-interference, Hana repeated. Right. Where was non-interference when the Verdani were calling for help? She was about to say more when another voice cut through the channel. It was small and scared, speaking standard with the careful pronunciation of someone who'd learned it as a second language. Captain Hana, this is Kelu. I am 7 years old. My family is on your big ship now. Hana's anger melted away instantly. Hello, Kelu, are you safe? Is your family okay? Yes, we are safe because of you. My grandmother says I should tell you something. She says thank you for seeing us when no one would look. She says you have the biggest heart in the whole galaxy. The child's words hit Hana harder than any weapon. Around the bridge, her crew was wiping their eyes. Even Oh Seung-min, who never showed emotion about anything, was sniffling. You tell your grandmother that we see you, Kelu. All of you. And we're not going anywhere. Hana switched to the fleet channel. All ships, this is New Dawn. I'm going to ask for a vote and I want everyone to be honest. We can run now and live to fight another day. We've already saved more people than anyone thought possible. Or we can stay and try to buy more time for the evacuation shuttles. But I won't lie to you about what staying means. She looked at the massive swarm fleet advancing toward them. Those bioships are going to tear us apart. Most of us won't see. Tomorrow. So I'm asking each ship to vote. Stay or go. No judgment either way. Song Minji was the first to respond from her battered fighter. Wildcard votes to stay. My dad always said the measure of a person isn't how they act when things are easy, but what they do when everything's falling apart. Park Min-ho's calm android voice came next. The Liberation votes to stay. We were created to serve, but we choose to protect. One by one, every remaining ship voted. Cargo haulers, mining vessels, converted passenger liners, stolen fighters. 23 ships crewed by outcasts and exiles, and every single one voted to stay. Choi Rina's surviving warriors were the last to vote. The Honor Guard has already given our answer with our lives. We stay until the end. Hana felt something break inside her chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was pride, so fierce it hurt. All right then. We came here to save lives, not count odds. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. The swarm fleet had formed into attack formation, the massive bioships beginning their advance. Smaller vessels swarmed around them like angry insects, ready to overwhelm anything that stood in their way. All ships. This is your final battle. Plan, Hana announced. We're going straight at them. Hit the big ones with everything we have. Don't try to survive. Try to do as much damage as possible. Every second we buy is another life saved. Oh Seung-min had been working frantically in his engineering bay, preparing one last surprise. Captain, I've rigged our remaining mining charges to overload. When the New Dawn goes down, she's taking as many of them with her as possible. Good man, Seung-min. All ships, follow the New Dawn's lead. We're going to punch right through their center and see how much chaos we can cause. The final charge began with Hana's cargo ship leading the way. The New Dawn wasn't built for combat, but Seung-min had turned her into the biggest improvised weapon in the fleet. Behind her came the survivors, 22 ships carrying everything from android refugees to warrior clans to young pilots who should have been safely hauling trade goods instead of facing certain death. The swarm opened fire. First, streams of bioplasma and crystalline projectiles filled the space between the fleets. The passenger liner Dawn's Hope took a direct hit and exploded in a brilliant flash. 2 mining ships followed seconds later, but the humans kept coming. Song. Minji's fighter weaved through the incoming fire like it was dancing, her guns blazing at any swarm ship that got too close. Park Min-ho's Liberation calculated impossible trajectories, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable while returning precise fire at critical systems. The New Dawn shuddered as enemy fire punched through her hull, but Hana kept her on. coursed toward the largest bioship in the enemy formation. Around her, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, even as alarms wailed and sparks flew from damaged consoles. 30 seconds to impact, reported Yoon Ji-won. The young man's voice was steady now, all fear burned away by determination. "It's been an honor serving with all of you," Hana said to her crew. Then she opened the fleet channel one last time. "For the Verdani, for everyone the galaxy forgot." The New Dawn struck the command bioship at full speed, just as Seungmin triggered the mining charges. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The sound that came from the swarm fleet wasn't quite a scream, but it was close. A high-pitched wailing that cut through space and made every survivor's teeth ache. For a moment nobody understood what was happening. Then Park Min-ho, his android brain processing information faster than organic minds could follow, figured it out. "They're retreating," he said, disbelief clear in his synthetic voice. "The entire fleet is pulling back." Captain Park Sora, commanding one of the 7 ships still able to move under their own power, watched through her cracked view screen as the massive bioships began turning away from Kepler 442c. The swarm had never retreated before. In every encounter on record, they had fought until every last crystal creature was destroyed. "Why are they running?" asked Lee Jinwoo from his position at the sensors. Half his face was bandaged from when a plasma conduit had exploded, but he'd refused medical treatment until the battle was over. "The New Dawn took out their command structure," Minho explained. "When Captain Hana rammed that command ship, she didn't just damage it. She broke their connection to the hive mind. Without coordination, they can't function as a unified force. 7 ships. Out of 37 that had come to answer the Verdani's call, only 7 were still flying. The rest were either destroyed completely or drifting as lifeless hulks. The cost had been terrible, but somehow impossibly they had won. Song Minji's fighter was barely holding together, her engines running on fumes and hope. Anyone else feel like we just pulled off the biggest miracle in galactic history? Let's not celebrate yet, Sora warned. We need to make sure the evacuation is complete, and someone needs to tell the Verdani what happened here. The work of rescue continued for another week. The 7 surviving ships, patched together with spare parts and determination, ferried the last refugees from the planet's surface. 3.5 million Verdani had been saved. It wasn't everyone, but it was more than anyone had dared hope. When the crisis began, the real changes started when the news feeds picked up the story. Someone had recorded parts of the battle, and within days the footage was spreading across every civilized world in the galaxy. Citizens of the great powers watched in shock, as 37 ships crewed by outcasts and exiles had done what their mighty fleets had refused to attempt. The Galactic Council tried to control the narrative at first. They issued statements about reckless endangerment of galactic security and unauthorized military action. But the footage of little Kelu thanking Captain Hana over the comm was harder to explain away. So was the image of the New Dawn, a converted cargo hauler, leading the final charge against odds that would have made professional militaries run screaming. On Altair Prime, golden-feathered citizens gathered in the streets demanding to know why their empire's vast fleets had been too busy to save dying civilians. The Cetian Federation faced protests on 17 worlds as their people questioned the non-interference policies that left entire species to face extinction alone. But the most significant change happened among the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Ships began converging on the outer rim, seeking out the survivors of the Kepler 442c battle. Smugglers, exiles, refugees, and rebels arrived by the dozen, then by the 100. They all had the same question: where do we sign up? Captain Park Sora found herself in command of a growing fleet that no government wanted to acknowledge. Her ship, the Rising Phoenix, had been a simple transport vessel before the battle. Now it served as the flagship for something unprecedented in galactic history, a military force that answered only to conscience. "So we need a name," suggested Han Kyung-mi, a former military officer who'd been court-martialed for refusing to fire on civilian protesters. "Something that tells the galaxy who we are." "The Forgotten Alliance," said Park Min-ho. His android crew had become the fleet's technical experts, maintaining ships that most mechanics would have written off as scrap. We are the ones the great powers forgot, fighting for those they chose to ignore. The name stuck. Within months, the Forgotten Alliance had grown to over 200 ships. They weren't all human anymore either. Exiled Altarian pilots flew alongside reformed pirates and runaway androids. Species that had never gotten along found common ground in their shared rejection by mainstream society. Their first major operation came when a mining colony in the Vega system sent out a distress call. Corporate enforcers were trying to force the miners off their land to make room for a more profitable automated operation. The local government was bought and paid for, and the Galactic Council classified it as an internal commercial dispute. Zora led 15 ships to Vega, and the corporate enforcers fled without firing a shot. The miners kept their homes, and the Forgotten Alliance gained another dozen recruits. Hana would have hated all this politics, Zora told her crew as they prepared to answer another distress call, this one from a refugee convoy being harassed by slavers. She never wanted to lead a movement or change the galaxy. She just wanted to help people who needed it. But change was exactly what was happening. Every time the Alliance answered a call that the great powers ignored, more people began asking uncomfortable questions. Why did outcasts and criminals care more about justice than legitimate governments? How had 37 ships accomplished what entire battle fleets claimed was impossible? The Alliance grew carefully, turning away anyone who seemed more interested in glory or revenge than in helping people. They developed their own code, simple and direct. Protect those who can't protect themselves, stand up for those who have no voice, and never ever abandon someone in need just because it's inconvenient or dangerous. Not everyone approved. The Galactic Council passed resolutions condemning the Alliance as a destabilizing influence on interstellar order. Several major powers put bounties on key Alliance leaders, though none were ever collected. The Alliance had too many friends among the forgotten and overlooked citizens of supposedly civilized worlds. 3 years after the Battle of Kepler 442c, Captain Park Sora stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked out at a fleet of over 800 ships. They came from every corner of the galaxy, united not by species or politics, but by a simple belief that doing the right thing mattered more than following orders. "Captain," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority distress call from the Kepler system. Apparently, the Void Swarm is back." Sora smiled grimly. The Swarm had learned from their defeat, adapting and evolving as they always did. But so had the Alliance. They were ready. "All ships, this is the Rising Phoenix. We have work to do." The galaxy was vast and full of those who needed help. The Forgotten Alliance would be there when the powers that be turned away. They would always be there, because someone had to be, and because Captain Lee Hana had shown them what it truly meant to be human.